Are you ready to take your message, your business, and your life to the next level?
Want to learn from someone with more than a decade of experience, training tens of thousands of people from all around the world?
Hi, Cliff. This is Pauline from Auckland, New Zealand.
John from Calgary, Alberta.
Amy Porterfield.
Michael Hyatt.
Dan here from Dunedin, New Zealand.
Ray Edwards.
Mark Mason.
Mike Stelzner.
Pat from Smart Passive Income.
It's Darren from Melbourne, Australia.
Now is the time to live the life of your dreams and do the work you feel most called to do in the world.
Welcome to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show.
Here's your host, Cliff Ravenscraft.
Welcome back, my friend. In today's episode, you're going to learn 5 significant shifts that need to happen in your mindset to transition from the mindset of an employee to the mindset of a business owner. And if you have been a business owner for many years, you might want to still stick around. You might think that you have the mindset of a full-time self-employed business owner. You may have been rocking it for the last 5, 10, 15 years as a business owner. But if you are not fully satisfied, if you don't feel fully fulfilled, if you are struggling to consistently make ends meet, if you are not experiencing a great sense of joy and peace and some margin in your life, you still might find some benefits in these 5 mindset shifts. Now, the way that I'm delivering this message for you in this episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show is a little unique. If you've been listening to my show over the last year or so, you know that I'm very interested in the world of technology, and specifically lately, I have a passion for what's the latest that's going on in the world of artificial intelligence. Back in episode 727 of this podcast, titled Exploring Speechify, Text-to-Speech Technology, Is It Worth the Subscription? A little update. I have invested the $140 a year. So I made that one-time annual subscription, and I am using Speechify almost daily for various different things, and I am loving it. As far as I'm concerned, I've already gotten $140 worth of value out of it just because I was able to get through a very stuffy sounding audio narration of a college textbook that is very deep into some concepts related to therapy and a specific way of doing coaching and all of this other stuff. Great insight, great information, wonderful book. The audio narration that went with it, absolutely horrendous. But using Speechify, I got through I'm getting through about 2 or 3 chapters a day, where I basically bought the book a couple months ago, got about 3 or 4 chapters in, and just set it aside. So it's already giving me a massive return on investment. But here's what we're doing today. I recently made a commitment for the month of May 2024. I am going to publish a minimum of 1 piece of public content every day during the month of May. Now, for me to do that, I have to make sure that I'm consistently creating opportunities. One opportunity that recently came up was I was connecting with a new Facebook friend on through direct message. He had sent me a Facebook friend request. I reached out and said, hey, what are you most excited about? What's going on in your world? And then all of a sudden he said, hey, why don't we get on a 20-minute chat if you're up to it? And I said, well, what would you want to get out of it? And we actually ended up having a 20-minute chat. And then he invited me to be a guest on his YouTube channel. And it's also, as a result of our conversation, going to turn into an audio podcast as well. And he says, Cliff, would you be a guest on my show? I said, hey, I happen to have some free time tomorrow, because this conversation happened on a Thursday. As I have some time tomorrow at 3:30 p.m., an opening in my schedule. And I have made this commitment to creating content every single day. I wonder, would you be willing to interview me in front of a live streaming audience on all of my social media channels. Now, I love to find out who is willing to say yes to something like that. And this gentleman, by the way, his name is Arfan Hussein. And he said, Cliff, I would be honored to do that. So we scheduled it out. I put everything together. And yesterday, we did just that. From 3:30 to 4:30 p.m., we broadcasted to my LinkedIn channel, my YouTube channel, my Facebook platform, and also the X platform. And the recording of that full, unedited live stream, that full interview is available online. And after it was finished, which, by the way, checked the mark for yesterday, piece of public content created. Yay. Wonderful. I love it. And then I'm sitting here thinking, that the insights that came out, the way that I shared specifically about the 5 mindset shifts necessary to go from having a mindset of an employee to the mindset of a business owner, I really like that. That's not a thing I'm typically interviewed on a lot these days. I've done that in the past, but these specific 5 top or mindset shifts, and talking about them in the way that I did yesterday, it's the first time in a long time, and I don't think I've ever talked about it in that way. And I thought, there's a lot that I like about this. I wonder if I should make that as an episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. So my initial thought was, let me just grab the audio recordings, both my side of the conversation and Arfan's side of the conversation, and I'll mold those together and put together an intro and an outro, and you'd have an episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. Certainly, that would have taken a lot less of my time, effort, and energy to produce this podcast episode. But it's not what I chose to do. In fact, I chose to play around with my technology tool, Speechify, that I've invested in. And instead of just giving you everything as it was recorded, I've decided to play around with what this makes possible. So, as I said, the conversation that we had was about an hour in length. But what I'm about ready to play for you is 44 minutes in length. That means 15 minutes of dialogue has been scrubbed from the original conversation. Now, some of that is me cutting out some of the things that, little side tangents and little stories that I told that I feel like, you know what, that doesn't necessarily stick with the theme here fully. And while it was fun, it's valuable, it's great for the live stream, if I'm going to put it in the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, there's that. Also, Arfan, great interviewer. Many times when I would have a dialogue or sharing my result or my thoughts on a particular mindset shift, he would summarize it. Now, this is his show. It makes a lot of sense for him to communicate and clearly state how he resonates with that at a deep level, and tell a little bit about how that's shown up for him in his life, and it's his show. It makes a lot of sense for him to do that. But what I realized is there was a lot of restating what I just said in his own words, and there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely not at all. But this gave me an opportunity. I wonder what it would be like if I just took the recording from StreamYard, which recorded each of our audios separately, and I went in and transcribed everything that Arfan said in the conversation in a single transcript. Then I brought that transcript into my Notion document, and I highlighted everything Arfan had said, and I used AI built into Notion to summarize and shorten and condense everything that Arfan had said and asked in the interview. Now, again, I didn't do this because Arfan wasn't a great interviewer. I didn't do it because I didn't think it was necessary for him to share his side of this. It made a lot of sense for his show. More than anything, I wanted to play around and see what it would be like if I were to go in and clean this up. Now, what I didn't do is train an AI voice on Arfan's voice. I would need to go get his permission and all sorts of other things for that. But what I did do is I took one of the voices that are one of the enhanced HD voices that they call it HD voices, that Speechify offers, and I fed the updated, summarized, and condensed text of Arfan's side of the communication, and I ran that through Speechify. And then, of course, I took each of those, recorded it in my Rodecaster Pro because you just can't download an audio recording of it, although I think they have Speechify Studio that you can do that for. Didn't go that route. Anyway, I then brought all of those in and edited in Arfan each of these things. So what you're hearing is not Arfan's voice. It's not even an AI enhanced voice. So it's very clear that what you're going to hear as Arfan is an AI generated voice. But it did a decent job. Why would I do this? Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to know why I went through all this trouble, stick around to the very end and I'll come in and I'll share with you why I chose to go through all of this work to create this version of this podcast episode.
We're discussing the transition from employee to business owner and the necessary mindset changes to overcome fear and achieve lasting success. When I had a conversation with Cliff, I thought he was the perfect person to discuss this topic. He experienced this transition firsthand in 2008. His journey has generated millions in sales through various courses, workshops, conferences, paid mastermind groups, and coaching programs. Cliff is a role model and an expert in this field. Let's rewind to 2008. Cliff, what inspired you to transition from a lucrative career as an employee to becoming a business owner? We would also love to hear about the career you transitioned from.
For 12 years prior to full-time self-employment, I was an insurance agent. I sold auto, home, life, health, and business insurance in a family-run insurance agency started by my grandfather in 1937. I was next in line to take over the family business. My mom and dad owned it at the time. I was incredibly successful in sales. I was one of the top insurance agents in the United States on multiple different levels for different lines of business. And I figured this is what I'm going to do with my life until I discovered podcasting as a hobby. I was sitting around listening to various different podcasts once I was introduced to this technology in 2005. My wife was watching this show called Lost. And I'm like, okay, I am hooked on whatever's going on this TV show. And lo and behold, there were 5 different podcasts devoted to the TV show Lost. I subscribed to all of them. It was just a passion. It was just a hobby. And I began to blog about what I was learning on my blog. And I came up with this theory about what was going on the show based upon everything that I'd seen. I did screen captures, all this other stuff. And after I put that theory together, I thought, this is really good. I think I'm really onto something. So I recorded a 3.5-minute audio file of me summarizing my theory and then putting a link in that audio summary back to my blog. And I submitted that to the Transmission podcast hosted by Ryan and Jen Azawa in Hawaii. They played my 3.5-minute audio summary in their podcast, which put me out to tens of thousands of listeners. One of those listeners happened to be somebody who was on the editorial team for EW, Entertainment Weekly. And so Entertainment Weekly went and read my blog, did an article about it, and then proceeded to send millions of people to my website, which caused it to get shut down. Bandwidth exceeded, account suspended. Please contact the billing department. That's how I got introduced to this whole world of online audio podcasting, if you will. And some folks suggested, hey, Cliff, why don't you start your own podcast? And I'm like, okay, I'll start my own podcast. And By the third episode, we had 27,000 subscribers. Now, all of a sudden, a guy in Northern Kentucky who most people had never heard of, except for a blog, maybe 300 people around the world with a decade of blogging experience had heard my name. But now tens of thousands. It was insane. And of course, the feedback that was coming in was pretty profound. People are like, wow, I really am resonating with what you and your wife are sharing in these podcasts. We began to create other podcasts to answer questions that people had about family, marriage, parenting, financial planning, business, all these different topics. And I had passion. So I just created lots of different podcast shows. And I eventually began to ask myself, man, what would life be like if I could do this for a living instead of selling insurance? This is far more aligned with what I feel led and inspired and desire to do in the world than the insurance business. I hadn't had any problem with the insurance business until I started podcasting. But once I started podcasting, and it was about 7 or 8 months into it, I began to see my career as an insurance agent, as profitable as it was a distraction from what I most wanted to do in the world.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that story because it emphasizes the pursuit of passion, transforming a hobby into something more impactful. What's intriguing is that when I started getting traction in business and considered making it full-time, I began to encounter various limiting beliefs. We're going to discuss mindset a lot, but were there times when you felt you were your own obstacle? Did you have to confront any mindset issues or anything similar?
First and foremost, I'll never forget the 2 or 3 weeks before I left my job. So I put a 90-day notice in. It was my mom and dad, right? And so I played a pretty critical role in the company. So I gave them a 3-month notice. And during that final few weeks in December of 2007, I'm like, what have I done? Is this the biggest mistake that I have ever made or will ever make in my life? Who am I to think that I could go out and make this hobby and turn it into a profitable full-time career? I have job security like nobody's business. And this was right before the crash of 2008. And so even before the actual crash, people were getting laid off left and right in the financial industries. And so it's like, what am I doing? And so I had so much fear. Quite frankly, I was worried about what other people would think of me, especially the people that I knew who had been laid off and they thought their jobs were secure. And it's like, Cliff, what do you think you're doing? You're a sole income earner for your family. You have a stay-at-home mom, wife who is taking care of 3 young kids. What are you doing? That was my fear. What are other people going to think about what I'm doing? What will people say? What if I fail? What if I fail miserably? What will this mean to my ego if all of a sudden I go and I have to go back and get my job back as an insurance agent, that I couldn't cut it in the world. There was all sorts of mindset related to that. Then fast forward past January 2008, now all of a sudden I'm in my first year of business and I'm working myself almost to death. And I'm not saying that with hyperbole. I literally almost died after my first year in business because of all of the anxiety, the fear, the worry, and the overwork, and my own lack of physical health and fitness activity. So I worked around the clock, 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 9 months without a single day off. During that 9 months, the business was generating revenue, but it was paying for the overhead of the business. Like it paid for health insurance for our family because we were self-employed. It paid for the CPA who handled the taxes because who knows how to do that? I certainly didn't. And then there was the overhead of subscription services, internet, the tools of the trade. But then there was no money left over each month for the first 9 months to pay me. No money, 0 income for 9 months. Finally, things were starting to pick up during the last quarter. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to take 1 day a week off. But I had to go to my employer and ask, hey, can I take a day a week off? And my employer says, on one condition. And I'm like, what's that? And he says, well, you've got to make up those hours by adding hours to the other 6 days of the week. And I'm like, what? By the way, my employer was me, just in case you didn't pick up the sarcasm here. So it was my own limiting belief that says that the only way you're going to do this. So for the final 3 months of the year, I was probably going to bed right around 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was starting between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning, almost no sleep at all. And to celebrate my first year in business, I ended up doing a 24-hour nonstop podcast marathon, recorded 24 podcast episodes in 24 hours, publishing them as I went along the way. After that was finished, I celebrated with a trip to the hospital where I almost died. I had massive gallbladder attack. I had gallstones everywhere, one stuck in my cystic duct, and it was not looking good. But that was my first year in business. And all of that because of my belief system and my mindset. I was just not prepared to be a business owner.
Looking back in hindsight, we can see the mindset shifts needed and consider possible improvements. However, going through it is challenging, as it often feels like swimming against the current. One of the main challenges faced by many people is overcoming their fears and continuing to push forward. Imagine working 13 to 14 hours a day for 9 months straight. Any person would eventually reach a point of burnout and consider giving up. Let's now focus on the essential mindset shifts for those who are at the transition point. They are ready to move on, ready to put their notice in, and ready to make the effort. However, they don't know what to expect or the actual challenges that lie ahead. For me, the fears began to surface when I first decided to put in my notice. I worried about what others would think. I wondered about my mother's reaction. She raised me to get a good job, a degree, and to be secure with a steady paycheck. As an immigrant who worked 3 jobs to help me reach where I am today, how would she react? So, what should you do if you're still working and preparing to take this leap? What is the first mindset shift that you need to focus on, or start cultivating faith in yourself?
Sure. So there are 2 pieces of advice that I want to give before we get into the mindset. If I'm speaking to somebody who still has the day job and they're ready to quit and go launch this thing, number 1, first piece of advice, don't quit your day job. Not just yet. And number 2, whatever you do, don't quit your daydream. What I mean by that is don't quit your day job until your daydream is generating revenue. For me, when I put my 90-day notice in, I was already earning about $3,000 to $5,000 a month consistently every single month in my online side hustle business. That was money that I was making in my free time outside of my normal business hours of an insurance agent. So my thought was, if I'm making $3,000 to $5,000 a month doing this in my free time, obviously, if I put my most productive 40 hours a week into this thing, I'm going to see a pretty significant return on that investment. Little did I know that there were some limiting beliefs that were going to be coming my way. But the first thing is I want to make sure that I tell people, anyone, my advice is make sure you have a good runway. There's a reason why I was able to make it in this experience and not give up. Number 1, I was incredibly well paid as an insurance agent. I had an incredible savings. My wife and I had become debt-free except for our mortgage. We had a big, huge bonus that final year that I was in insurance, and I was able to live without an income for 9 months. Now, it wasn't comfortably, but we did do that. And also, this is a part of my story. I ended up, for the 3rd quarter of 2008, I ran out of the emergency fund. I ran out of the savings, and I ended up taking, I think it was $12,000 or something like that. Or maybe it was, I needed $9,000, and I took out $12,000 out of my retirement account. So I had to pay taxes and penalties and all that other stuff. But I had the financial means that allowed me to make this leap. And I also had a validated set of products and services. So don't quit your day job until your daydream is producing revenue that you feel like this and you have some time, and recognize income doesn't just magically just keep continuing to show up. So that's the first thing that I want to say. A couple of things that I will share as far as mindset is concerned. Number 1, you have to overcome any limiting belief you have about whether or not you have the ability to sell. I don't care what your online business is or what your self-employed venture is. If you're an artist, if you're a freelancer, if you do graphic art, whatever, I'm going to tell you right now, you have to understand that you have this new identity. I am a sales and marketing person. Unless you have the money to go hire somebody to do that for you, you're going to need the skill of selling. So sure, by all means, go and take your area of genius, your expertise, and go and create that. But make sure that you devote at least minimum 3 to 5 hours a week, every single week, to reading, studying, learning the techniques and skills of sales and marketing, and also make sure that you're putting in about 5 to 10 hours a week in the actual process of marketing your business. The next thing that is on top of there, the mindset, is the whole idea about money. You're going to have to understand that if you've been paid, let's just say $20 an hour, your employer would never have hired you for $20 an hour unless what you're doing in the business is worth at least $70, $80, $90, $100 an hour or more. Because as a business owner, you're going to not only pay yourself a paycheck, but you're going to, and you're probably already familiar with the fact that they take out federal taxes and Social Security and stuff like that. Well, depending on how you're set up, chances are you're going to have to double that for Social Security and federal taxes on the employer contribution side. Your employer's been doing it all along. All right. And then you need to think about your benefits, such as health insurance and all these other things. And there's overhead and there's all of these expenses. And quite frankly, most people struggle charging what is necessary to actually have a profitable business. And that was one of my biggest hangups, was just this money mindset. I started out at $50 an hour, and quite frankly, there's just no way you can have a profitable business and be the sole income earner of a family of 5 in my area and make $50 an hour as a full-time self-employed business owner. It just will not work out. At $50 an hour, no matter how great you are in what it is that you do, you're still going to go month after month after month, making all that's necessary to pay for the benefits, making all that's necessary to pay your CPA and to pay for all your subscription and your internet and buy whatever little ancillary little things here for the overhead of your business. But at $50 an hour, you are not going to be bringing home a paycheck.
That's an excellent tip. My experience with transitioning was slightly different. While you were managing your existing job in insurance and simultaneously building a side business, I was supporting my wife as she built her business. The financial aspect was crucial because it provided security and peace of mind, knowing we could comfortably transition. In the worst-case scenario, we had reserves for 6 months, and I could return to employment. The business was already generating income, not enough to fully replace the salary, but enough to cushion us. That played a big role in maintaining our sense of security. You mentioned sales, and I often hear people who haven't yet made the transition say they dislike sales and don't see themselves as salespeople. However, embracing that identity is vital. Here's a significant takeaway. If you find yourself saying you hate sales, stop. Change that mindset and language. Would you agree with that?
You have to. As soon as you say, I hate sales, and you're actually looking to grow a business as a full-time self-employed person, if you say, I hate sales, you're basically saying, I hate getting new paid clients. I hate having people learn about who I am and how the products and services I have can add value to their lives. I hate eating. I hate paying my bills. I hate being able to make ends meet. You are literally saying the same thing. If you hate sales and you're not willing to change your belief about your identity as being a salesperson, then stay with the day job and let somebody else do the sales, and you can just be the person that does your skill.
I like that. We've covered substantial ground. For those considering transitioning, you've gained valuable insights from someone who made the switch many years ago and survived. Many businesses don't last beyond 2 years. Even more alarming, a larger percentage don't make it past 8 to 10 years. So, when considering a long-term commitment, like starting a business, what are some necessary shifts in mindset to ensure longevity and avoid returning to a regular job after 6 or 12 months? What are the adjustments needed to be in it, to win it, and not give up?
There are 3 other shifts. So we've already talked about money mindset, and we also talked about changing your identity about sales. So the third one is self-discipline. When I became full-time self-employed, I will tell you that I had a lack of discipline problem. And what I mean by that is I no longer have anybody telling me what time I need to wake up. I no longer had anybody telling me how many hours to work. I never had anybody telling me what I need to focus on, when I need to focus on it, when I need to shift from one thing over to another thing. I had no managers giving me any clear direction of exactly how all of this stuff fits together. And so for me, so much of it in the first few weeks and the first few months was, well, gosh, what do I do with all this free time? I had to get into some discipline, right? And so that was the first thing is I need to begin to create some routines. And thankfully I did. I eventually said, okay, wait a second. I need to treat this as though I've got a job to do, that I am self-employed. And in a way, I began playing multiple characters in this drama. And that is, I had to play the role of the employer and had to play the role of the employee. And so I had to set down some guidelines like, listen, here's the business hours, here's what we're doing, and all this other stuff. And so I had to identify myself into different roles, and I needed to put boundaries. It's like, listen, I can't just work in the business. I also need to work on it. I need to start limiting the number of hours that I'm coaching people one-on-one so that I can reserve enough time to market my products and services to people who will hire me later. And to do that, I actually need to learn a couple of skills about how to do that effectively using social media and strategies and skills like copywriting. And so I needed to go and take courses, or I needed to listen to podcasts, or I needed to read books, and I needed to study how to do this different type of sales than what I had done as an insurance agent. There's a lot of skills that I needed to develop. But I guess initially my thought was, I'm just going to show up, people are going to hire me, and all day, every day, I just get to do what I love, which is to coach or to get behind a microphone and to just talk. And there was just a lot more self-discipline that was necessary. It's like, listen, I know that I love to do all these things, and I could do it all day, every day, and just be totally fulfilled. But guess what? It doesn't pay the bills. There are other rules that need to be played, and there needs to be balance, and there needs to be routine. There needs to be blocked out time for different categories, and self-discipline is something that must be mastered.
I can relate a lot to this. About 6 months into my journey, my wife and I sat down and wrote out every single task we were undertaking. I found myself in multiple roles: the ads manager, the funnel builder, the copywriter. This exercise helped us better manage our time and identify tasks that needed to be delegated. Recognizing that I wasn't the strongest copywriter, for instance, pushed me to improve that skill. Self-discipline and routine establishment are crucial. There's no one to monitor your performance or instruct you on what to do. Everything is on you, demanding an extra layer of self-discipline. One of the most helpful strategies during this transition was to evaluate the roles I was fulfilling from a higher perspective. This bird's-eye view allowed me to assess my performance realistically and identify areas for improvement rather than mindlessly working without direction. Work-life balance is another challenge that many entrepreneurs, including myself, face during the transition period. This can lead to burnout. To secure long-term success, we need to consider other mindset shifts. So, what are the other 2 mindset shifts that can help us achieve this?
The fourth mindset shift is what you believe or think about the importance and the prioritization of self-care. Now, this is something, quite frankly, I gave zero attention to in January 2008. My story is I ended up in the hospital and I almost died in January 2009. So self-care became a very top priority for me following that experience. And so I began to really look into what is self-care. And prior to that, I had beliefs that self-care was kind of selfish. Nobody should be sitting around resting when there's work to be done. nobody should be resting when the money's not there to put food on the table. I mean, come on, seriously, you've got to just work. And so self-care just was not a thing. However, what I have learned since, if I would have known what I know now about the importance of self-care, if I would have created a routine, and I'm just going to give you something that I think would be realistic for that time, because I'm very familiar with what my life looked like back then, but here's what it could have looked like if I knew about this importance. I could have woke up right around 6 o'clock in the morning. And from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning, that could be spent not checking email, not checking anything social. Of course, January 2008, there wasn't a ton of social back then like there is today. But still, there was social. Twitter was out and Facebook was out. But anyway, the first hour of the day, kind of just sitting back and thinking and reflecting, journaling, prayer, meditation, reading something inspirational, and just really sitting down and relaxing and kind of just having a good overall positive vibe to start the day. Don't think about anything. Don't worry about anything that's coming the rest of the day. I just want the first hour from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. is all about just sitting here, appreciating the gift of life that I have. So that's the first thing that I would do. From 7 to 8, I would devote that to some level of physical development. So I would go for a walk, go to the gym and work out, get a cardiovascular, do a little strength training, stuff of that nature. If I am traveling to and from the gym, the commute to the gym, I'm going to listen to some sort of professional or personal development material that trains and educates me. But then I'm going to get that workout, and then I'm going to come home. By 9 o'clock, right between 9:30, I'm going to start my work day. And that will be the first time I check my email. That's the first time I look at my calendar commitments. That's the first time I look at my to-do list. And the other thing that I would do, knowing this, and it kind of ties back into routine, is I'm going to look at everything and I'm going to say, okay, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 things that are the most important things for me to accomplish before I end my workday? I'm going to prioritize those top 1, 2, or 3 things, and I'm going to understand that if I don't get everything done by, and of course, I'm still going to give myself the 2008 reality of there's a lot of things that need to get done. So imagine I'm starting at 9:30. So I'm going to say at 5 o'clock, I need to stop working and have dinner and time with my family. And yes, I might come back and I might work from 7 to 9:30. By 10 p.m., I am in bed. And so from 10 p.m. to 6 p.m., I've now got 8 hours of sleep. If I would have routinely done that, I absolutely am convinced I would have avoided 70 to 80% of the anxiety, the worry, the fear, and the doubt, and the lack of self-confidence, all of that because I just did not have a self-care routine.
I can personally attest to that. About 2 years into my business, at the peak of our success, my wife and I were working between 70 to 80 hours a week. It got to the point where I had no routine in my life, and my health started to deteriorate. I gained weight and fell into a depression. I was on the verge of burnout and the business hit a low point. Taking a 2-day hike in the mountains was a turning point for me. The hustle culture often tells us to ignore our needs and focus solely on our work. But I've learned that it's crucial to have simple routines that allow for calmness and reduce anxiety. This was what I needed to get out of that phase where I was making a lot of money but not enjoying it anymore. What Cliff is advising is golden. If you're not yet at the point of working 12 to 13 hours a day or haven't yet transitioned from the hustle culture, it's important to shift towards a self-care, holistic approach. The common airplane analogy comes to mind. Put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. From my own experience, I was close to being hospitalized. If I had continued the way I was for another 6 months, I could have ended up there. This is valuable advice for anyone, even those who are more tenured and seasoned in business and who may not be giving themselves enough self-care. It's never too late to start taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and it's never too late to get back to it as well. I just want to say that if you once had a great self-care routine, but somewhere along the way you have maybe let that slide, it's not too late to get back at it.
Yes, absolutely. We've discussed 4 mindset shifts so far. 1. The money mindset. 2. Changing your identity to view yourself as a sales and marketing professional. 3. Self-discipline and commitment to creating routines. 4. Prioritizing self-care. There's one more topic to cover. I'm eager to hear it since everything has been insightful thus far.
This one right here, I would have not succeeded in business. I would have failed, and I would have gone back to what was known and what was comfortable without this last one. And that is upgrade your peer group. Your life will be the direct reflection of the expectations of the people you spend the most time with. Prior to being full-time self-employed, most of my time and my peer group was spent with people who are also employed. People who think, wow, you get paid $50 an hour to do what? That's amazing. How do you do that? How do you sleep at night? That sounds like you're taking advantage of people. These are people who think that $50 an hour is a lot of money. Whereas when I started to actually upgrade my peer group in a pretty drastic way, I was at, let's just say, $150 an hour. And they're like, wait, you do one-on-one coaching and you only charge $150 an hour? What? How do you make ends meet with only charging So that's the difference in the mindset and the conversations between doing life with other business owners who understand what it takes to run a business, operate a business profitably, versus doing life with employees where the average person is, well, back in 2008, for me, the average person was making, let's just say, $20 to $35 an hour. They just don't understand life at the level of the business owner, the amount of risk that's involved and all the other things that happen. So for me, that was the biggest game changer. Now, during that first year, if I had the peer group that I have today, I probably would have walked away in my first year in business with probably about $100,000 to $200,000 in personal profit. If I simply met once a week, every week, with the group of people that I hang out with every week today. But those people were not in my life. I didn't know any of them in 2008. But I told you that I wouldn't have made it in my first year in business had I not upgraded my peer group, which I did do. There was one person in my life who was full-time self-employed. He was the one person who got on a call with me and talked me off the ledge every single time I thought it was time to give it up and go back to insurance. He was the one person who says, Cliff, this is normal. This is just how things work. You've got this. I'm telling you what you've built. There's momentum that's growing. You can't throw in the towel. And if I did not have this one person who was a business owner who had been through everything I'd been through, if I didn't have him in my peer group, I wouldn't have stayed in business. Now, I did have another peer group that kind of up-leveled a little bit. I started a Google group. So this is old technology. I think they still have it today. Google Groups is still a thing. And this is a technology where you could put a bunch of people into like an email circle, and you email this group. And every time you send an email, everybody gets an email in their inbox. And if you hit reply, everybody gets the reply. So that's what this tool does. It's kind of like online forums, except for it's all done in email. So I created a personal peer group of people that I thought would support me. Now, some of them had business experience, but not necessarily full-time self-employed. And some of them were just very positive-minded people who supported me. But I surrounded myself with a supportive peer group. So people who were not going to question whether or not, what do you think you're doing, right? So I did build that. Interestingly enough, I told you there was a time in the third quarter of 2008, there wasn't enough money to put food on the table. I needed to take money out there. I mean, the business was still paying the overhead, but I need some food for the table. So I did take some money out of my retirement account. But another thing somebody suggested to me, Cliff, why don't you apply for food assistance, food stamps? And I'm like, oh, there's no way. That is like the way that I was brought up, that's just I couldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. I brought this up to my wife. She goes, well, why don't we do that? It'd be nice to have a consistent flow of food coming in that would be kind of nice, Cliff. So I went to the Google group, and this is the importance of a peer group. So I sent an email and I said, guys, here's what the situation is. Here's the update. Here's how things are going. Somebody suggested that I apply for food stamps. What do you think? The first guy who responded said, that's it. Cliff, this is where I draw the line of my support. I can no longer, in good conscience, encourage you to consider this pursuit. You've crossed the line. I think it's time for you to go get your job back with your mom and dad. I was rooting for you, but it's clear that this isn't working out. You're 9 months in. By this time, my recommendation is if you are at the place where you're thinking about this, it's time to head back to the insurance office. And that confirmed all of the fear and all of the worry and all of the doubt, everything. It confirmed everything. And if that was the only person that responded, I would have given up right then. But within about 3 to 5 minutes after that, the next person in this email group, there were 10 people. He was the first of the 10 to respond. Within just 3 to 5 minutes, the next person said, Cliff, before you do anything, remove so-and-so from this group. Next, after you've removed him from the group, go apply for food stamps. Here's why. The system was created for people like you. It was created as a temporary stopgap for somebody who could really use this. And quite frankly, all those years that you've been working as an insurance agent, you've paid way more in taxes into this system. You'll never exhaust what you've already done. And here's the other thing, Cliff, what you've built, the momentum, everything you've got going on, you're going to pay more taxes in 1 month than you will ever take from this system moving forward at some point. Go apply. And then everybody else, the other 8 people behind that supported that. And they all said, yes, move so-and-so from this group. And I did. I removed that person from the group. But this is the peer group. This is what I'm talking about. Without this encouragement, without these people who help me see it from outside of the perspective of my limiting beliefs, my fears, my feelings of insecurity, my feelings of lack of self-confidence, people who are able to help press me on towards what they see in me that sometimes I struggle to see in myself. Upgrade your peer group. So here are the 5. Work on your money mindset. I encourage you to get a book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, E-K-E-R. This book will radically shift the way you think about money. The second one, understand that you need to shift your identity. You are in sales. If you are going to be full-time self-employed, you must learn how to sell effectively, and you must dedicate time to sales and marketing in your business. Number 3, self-discipline and routine. Block out your time, create some routines, and stick to it, and get as much help and accountability in this area as you possibly need. It doesn't matter if you have no self-discipline at all. I am proof that you can go from having no self-discipline to being an incredibly disciplined person. It can be done, and you must do it. And the 4th one is self-care. If you do not get yourself into a peaceful, relaxed state on a daily basis, you will consistently be in high beta brainwave states, which is the same as fight or flight. That means that your cortisol levels are going to continue to raise through your body. It's going to allow you to think all sorts of like, I'm going to get really anxious. I'm going to go and do lots of activity. But what you will lack is the ability to communicate with your prefrontal cortex of your brain. Literally every single day you are shut off from the creative thought, the solution-focused part of your brain. Every day you must be in a relaxed state. at some point, at least 10, 15 minutes of prayer and meditation and appreciation and a feeling of everything is going well in my life. There's so much to be thankful for. At least 10 to 15 minutes of every day must be in that state for you to succeed. And then number 5, upgrade your peer group. Your life, your business, everything you experience, the quality of everything will be the direct reflection of the people you spend the most time with.
Wow. I love that. I love all 5 of those. You've shared some remarkable insights about mindset. While this is just the tip of the iceberg, reflecting on your journey, what would you say is one of the most significant mindset shifts you've made that has truly transformed your experience as a business owner?
The biggest mindset shift that I've ever experienced is the understanding of what a belief is. And I have an entire opening keynote address of a conference that I used to host called Free the Dream Conference. By the way, you can get this for free at mindsetanswerman.com/free. It's titled All Beliefs Have Consequences. For me, what I recognized and what I had learned is that everything that I hold as truth is actually just a belief. Most of those beliefs I picked up when I was a kid because of something my mom and dad said, and they picked it up because of something their mom and dad said, and they picked it up because of or it was my religious leaders of the day, or it was my peers at school, the teachers. We don't have to go very far to see that there's a lot of people who have a lot of limiting beliefs. But when we're 5 years old, 7 years old, we don't have the ability to constructively consider, is what my teacher stating a belief that is limiting? But our teacher in school, we're taught they're an authority figure. They're here to educate us. They have our best interest at heart. And so they tell us something as an absolute truth. Money doesn't go on tree. The harder, you have to work hard to earn your money. All these things. And you got all of these different statements coming in, and we've adopted them, and now we believe them. And everything we experience in our thought life and our emotional life comes from our beliefs, and we're unconscious of most of them. Once we become conscious of them, we're like, but yeah, it's true. And so the biggest thing that I learned, the biggest epiphany, was to understand that a belief is nothing more than a thought that I have a feeling of certainty is true. It doesn't mean that it's true. It's just that it's a thought that I feel certain is true. Another way of saying it is a belief is nothing more than a thought that I've had a habit of thinking. And as soon as I learned that, I began to learn the power of questioning everything. Every belief that I have, I'm willing to question.
That's a significant one. I've experienced life coaching myself. It involves examining our thoughts, which generate emotions and influence our actions, leading to the results we achieve. When we start questioning the authenticity and origin of these thoughts, it can be quite powerful. You mentioned some training. Could you share the link again?
mindsetanswerman.com/free. There's a very big, bold promise. It says, give me 60 minutes and I'll literally change your life. And I mean it. You will not be able to experience the same results that you are getting in life that you've been struggling with. You will learn exactly how to change the actions that you take. You'll understand that you cannot change those actions until you change how you think and feel, because how you think and feel determines what actions you're going to take. But you will never be able to change your habitual thinking and feeling without uncovering what your beliefs are that cause that thinking and feeling in the first place. And in this talk, I'm simply going to teach you 4 things. Number 1, how to discover what beliefs are holding you back. Most people are unaware of 90% of what causes the emotional reactions inside of them. So number 1, you'll learn exactly how to discover unconscious beliefs. Number 2, you'll be able to discover what was the source of those. And it's important so that you understand they're not yours. You just picked it up from somebody else and collected it, and you've been holding it in your backpack ever since. Number 3, you'll learn how to disassociate from those limiting beliefs. And number 4, and this is very important, you'll need to replace those with empowering alternative beliefs. And I will also, as a bonus, teach you how to condition those new beliefs, because your old beliefs have been conditioned. You need to condition the new empowering alternative beliefs. Once you do this, if you change one belief, You'll never be able to think and feel the same way ever again about that. And when you change how you think and feel, you will act differently. And when you act differently, you will have a different result in life. It is a guarantee your life will never be the same. You can get that talk for free at mindsetanswerman.com/free. By the way, I am a salesperson. I am a marketing person. Within a couple of hours of signing up, you'll get an email that says, "Did you get what you were promised?" And there's an offer in there to buy the full Free the Dream course for $197. Do not buy it. Instead, if you sign up and if you watch the entire opening keynote address and you hit reply to that email with a little link to buy it for $197, if you will mention that you heard this message here today, put free course in the email subject line, email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. I'll give you the full course for free. Well, there you go. That's going to wrap it up for that conversation that I had with Arfan Hussain. Again, the conversation that you just heard, as I mentioned at the front of the show, highly edited, highly condensed, and that is not Arfan's voice. If you want, you can actually go into the show notes. I will put links to the original live stream production of Arfan and I having that conversation if you want to hear what it originally sounded like. I'll put the link to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, as well as a link to and a description of Arfan in the subject or in the show notes of this podcast episode. Now, if you're still listening here at the end, you might be interested in my answer as to why would I go through all of this trouble? Why couldn't I just take Arfan's full interview and just go in? I could have still condensed and cleaned it up just much in the same way that I did here. The reason why is because over the years, I've had some amazing private conversations with individuals where oftentimes they ask me something in a conversation and I will, in response, share some pretty profound insights from my journey through life. I will tell stories that I may have told 10 or 15 times in the past, but wow, the way that I just told it in this private one-on-one coaching conversation is a way that I've never told it before. And it's the best telling of the story to date. And so much of it had everything to do with the rapport that had been established in this relationship and the energy of where we were in the moment of that conversation. Basically, something that would be very challenging to reproduce organically, or non-organically, I should say. I have tons of these stories. And my thought was, occasionally, what if I were to take a private conversation where a person opened up and shared a couple of lines? Hey, this is something that I've experienced this week. Here's a little story of what I was thinking and how I was feeling. And I was just wondering, Cliff, have you ever dealt with this? And if so, how do you handle it? So all of that could be done in such a way where I could take that transcript word for word, and I could take their question, put it in Speechify, and put an AI voice. Whether I could use a male voice for a male person that I had a conversation with, I could use a female voice for a female, or if I wanted to really protect the anonymity of that person, I could just switch it up because it really wouldn't matter. Here's the situation, though. There would be no identifiable details whatsoever as to who that person was. But what I could do is I could use AI voice to kind of do the setup and then play and edit in the story in that incredibly powerful, high energy way that previously would have gone unheard, with the exception of that one person who was in that one-on-one conversation. And so I have tons of things that have come up over the years. And many of them, I'm like, should I go and edit that out? And I put it on a little to-do list. It's like all this other stuff. And prior to these AI tools, there was really no way in my mind of how I was going to do that. And originally I'm like, okay, so, hey, here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to play for you something that came up in a conversation with so-and-so, or with somebody that I'm working with. I'm not going to give you any details about who this person is. And then what I could do is I can summarize what that person was going to saying or whatever. And I've done that to some degree and to an effect that, quite frankly, has not been all that appealing. But taking what I've done today, could I take a conversation or a portion of a conversation and have the dialogue go back and forth, and without any identification and no identifying detail or insight or information that would reveal the identity of that person in any way, shape, or form, could I produce something that, still very much I could say, hey, this is AI-generated voice that I'm having this conversation with, but here's the conversation, and this is kind of how it went. And that's what today was. That's what this episode is. It's dual intent. Is number one, to share 5 mindset shifts that are absolutely mission critical if you want to shift from having a mindset of an employee to having a mindset of a business owner. And also, I wanted to see if I could actually put this thing together. Now, obviously, I've made it clear at the opening of the show, and I've even mentioned it here at the end of the show, that this is a conversation that I had with Arfan Hussein for his YouTube channel. All of the information about Arfan is going to be put into the show notes. But if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost certain if you were to go back and listen to it again, from the beginning of when I play our conversation all the way until I finished the conversation and came for this end, you'll notice that Arfan's name is not mentioned anywhere. And there is absolutely no identifying information whatsoever that would lead you to think, to know who it was that I was actually talking to. And that's what I wanted to see if I could pull off. Anyway, I'm going to go back and listen to this at some point, either later this weekend or early this week, this coming week, and see how I did. But that's what I wanted to share with you today. By the way, if you are already full-time self-employed and you are not surrounded by a peer group of people who are absolutely committed to living life personally and professionally at the highest level of what you're capable of living, if you find yourself lonely in the journey of full-time self-employment and you want to upgrade your peer group to people who are always taking forward action, who are always committed every week to bringing their best of their education, their experience, their areas of expertise, skills, talents, and abilities to be of service to you on your personal and professional journey through life, then I need you to know that the Next Level Mastermind might just be what it takes to upgrade your peer group to the next level. Head over to nextlevelmastermind.info. That's, again, nextlevelmastermind.info, not .com, nextlevelmastermind.info. And if you are an aspiring or early stage entrepreneur who's just getting your feet started, check out mindsetanswerman.com/free. And then don't forget to email me and ask me for that free session or that free course. Until next time, I encourage you to take everything you do to the next level.
Mindset Answer Man.